All right. Hi. Welcome to the February 9th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. So I'm going to do just a quick audio test to make sure everything is coming through as expected. I'll just go to my browser, my other computer. Just bear with me and we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Okay, sounds like the audio is coming through just fine. Okay, so my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a product specialist for Steinberg products for the United States distributor. I'll be the host of the Hangout. I'm presenting from outside Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you have not attended one of these hangouts before, all you have to do is you could submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could just simply enter them in the live chat field. There will be an index created for all the topics covered in today's hangout. So you could actually just look up the questions and jump to a particular question with a timestamp. And also Jan, who's usually, I'm not sure if he's on the Hangout today. He's usually a loyal attendee from Stockholm. He does a site called cubaseindex.com, which is a great resource if you wanted to say, oh, did Greg cover this in a question? You can go to cubaseindex.com, type in your question, and do a search. And it'll search through like more than 320 hours of Hangouts that we've done since the pandemic started. So it's a fabulous resource to check out. So if you want to introduce yourself, tell us where you're from. If you're watching this on a replay, you may want to skip ahead a couple minutes while we let people get logged in. But let's go ahead and a couple of other things. Like many of you during COVID era, my family is at home, so you may hear my wife or my son above me, so I may have an interruption. I'll apologize in advance for that. We'll have a lot of questions coming in. The ability for people to ask questions will far exceed the speed of my ability to respond to them. So if you ask your question, we'll try to go through chronologically. Occasionally, my chat field may jump and I may lose a couple of questions. I'll apologize in advance for that. But if we could try to refrain from asking the same question repeatedly, that would be like really helpful. That just kind of slows down the whole process. If you ask your question and you don't get an immediate response, we'll try to get there. But that could just kind of clog up a lot of the chat field. And sometimes when you ask your question, it's sometimes helpful if you could say, I'm running Cubase Pro on Mac OS, or I'm running Cubase Elements 9.5 on Windows 10. That information sometimes is helpful. But let's go ahead and see who is on the Hangout. All right, so we see Walter Blackledge from St. Louis. All right, we have Brian from Crystal Coast, North Carolina. John Costigan from Kenosha. Or we have Uno from Finland. All right, so we have Stefan from Sweden. Okay, so we have Scott from Racine. All right, so we have London checking in. We have Sir Robert Robinson from Atlanta, loyal attendee, as well as Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. All right, so we have South Korea, Philip. Okay. All right, so and Jan from CubaseIndex.com, he's on the Hangout. Appreciate all his efforts he does in making that website for us. All right, so it's Soren from Sweden. All right, now we have Sir N68 from Soren in Sweden. All right. All right, so we have Puerto Rico. Got to do some Steinberg seminars there years ago. It was a lot of fun in San Juan. All right, so we have Kenya, Germany, Berkshire, UK, Argentina, Israel, Johannesburg. All right, so we have Colombia, Vancouver. All right, we have the DJ Mixes It. All right. We see Gareth on. He's saying it's Greg o'clock, so that's good. All right, we'll wait just a couple minutes. We'll get some more people logged in. All right. All right. So I think I missed Taylor Sapp from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. All right, so we have Lebanon, Oregon, India. All right. Okay. All right, we'll just wait a couple minutes. I already see some questions on automation. All right, so we have the Bronx. All right, so Carlos, who's a loyal attendee, says, greetings from Colombia. Please give us a greeting in Spanish. So, hola, ¿qué tal? Bienvenidos. All right. All right, so we see Pablo on a Hangout from Galicia, España. All right, we'll wait just another minute or so, then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so we have Patrick from Sacramento. Gary Corbett on the Hangout. Wonderful keyboard player. He's played with all these amazing rock bands and other people as well. So, pop artist from the 80s. Good to see you. All right, so we have Tim Weinheimer. All right, so Millard Brown. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And I know we had a question or two from last Hangout that I just wanted to. Okay, so let's go ahead. Okay, so we see from Daniel, I'm trying to get a slow curve shape using the line tool and drawing automation. However, it is only creating a quick rapid shape. How do I adjust the length intensity of it? So let's take a look. So let's go ahead and just select our drawing tool. So a lot of times, people have the drawing tool default to lines, but we could also just come over here. So let's say if I want to do a parabola, and then I think if I just want to come here and hold down, so if I grab my parabola, I could just, adjust the points right here. So let me just, so if I wanted to have this go every 4 measures, I'll just, so let's say if I wanted to take from every 4 measures, if I wanted to take that particular automation point, I could say, okay, let's just go to 4 measures or to 8 measures. And then if I wanted to, I could just kind of select that particular range. So if I wanted to select those particular automation points to duplicate, I could now just select those and be able to, duplicate those events. So, so I'm not sure if that is kind of what you wanted to do. So let's say if I wanted to do like a sine wave or a triangle. So I think here, if I wanted to just hold down the shift key, at that point, you could change the frequency of the automation. So if you want it to be like that, or if you wanted to, again, just hold down the shift key, that will allow you to kind of adjust the rate of the automation. So if you wanted that to be like really tight, automation, and from here, so just holding down that shift key. So if I wanted that to kind of arc every 8 measures or whatever, that will allow you to kind of change the actual rate of the particular, as you draw the automation in. So try just holding down the shift key. And let's just see if I wanted to do the sine wave, see kind of a further clarification. So, yep, that was a sine wave. All right, so, but yeah, so try just, Daniel, just holding down the shift key while you draw the automation in. All right, so we have Michael checking in from Greece. All right, so we had Ted Springman from Sherman Oaks. I think Ted had a question on the last Hangout asking me, if my memory is correct, about creating a macro that would allow to take events that have more than 1 second of space between them and to move them to have exactly 1 second of space. So I kind of created a macro for this. I was working on this right before the Hangout, so it could be a good presenter for Ted because he's very dedicated to our Steinberg Hangouts and to Cubase. So I kind of combined a macro in conjunction with a project logical editor preset. So I made a project logical editor preset, and I just called it move event 1 second later. So what this will do is we're going to, in the project logical editor, we're going to choose transform for the function. And on our filter target, like what we want to affect, will be our container type is going to be equal to an event. So this is an event is one of these little sections here. And then I'm going to say that the property is set to event is selected. And what I want to do is take this selected event, and what I want to do to that selected event is going to be here, where we could say, I want to adjust the position, and I want to add, and we could just come over here and we're going to say seconds. So I think Ted wanted to add 1 second. And we could save this as a preset. So I just kind of saved it as a preset, and we'll call this, I just moved event 1 second. So what I wanted to do is and this macro, you may have to start off with the cursor kind of at the end of the event. So if the cursor of the very first event hit the letter N, and what this macro is going to do is basically to use the right arrow to select that event. It's going to do like a control or command L, which you could do is move to. So it's going to move this selected event to the cursor. And you can do that with command L. And what this will do now is we could trigger, and now what I want to do is to trigger this particular project logical editor preset that moves that event over 1 second. And then I wanted to hit the N key, which will take me to the beginning of the next event and to the end of that event. So I'm going to hit the N key twice. So my macro, what it looks like, and what the macros allow you to do is to actually just kind of automate that process so you don't have to fire off key commands or go kind of menu diving. So when I go to my key commands, I just created a new macro, and it's going to be navigate to the right, edit, move to cursor. So that will select the event to the right. It's going to move that to the cursor. It's going to process this logical editor, and then it's going to move to the next event, which is the start of the event that was just moved, and then to the end of that event. Now, realize that when we do this, we have to kind of, probably have the first event selected for this to work, and then we'll just hit N. So I'll go ahead and close this, and I will, and just to show the macro one more time with just a little slower in case you wanted to pause the video on playback. So it's navigate to the right, edit, move to cursor, process the project logical editor preset. So we need to save that preset and then locate the next event twice. So once this is set up, I'm going to go edit, and then we could assign macros. And once a macro has been created, you could assign your own keyboard shortcut for that macro. And I'm going to say move event 1 second. And we see that it's basically created the same starting off point that we were at before. So move events 1 second away. And again, move events 1 second away. And at that point, all these events are now exactly 1 second apart. So hopefully that will kind of speed up the editing workflow for you, Ted. All right. All right, so we have Aloha, Oregon. All right, so we also have India. All right, so we have someone else from Virginia. So from the DJ Mixes It. So wonder where in Virginia you're at. So I'm in Alexandria between Old Town and Mount Vernon. All right, so we have Sable Winters from Bay Area, San Francisco. Good to see you. Okay, question. Hello, Greg. Can we create a track preset with a macro with a pre-selected preset, and could we create a default track preset for audio and instruments? So usually the presets, so I don't know of a way to do that. You know, if you're dealing with track presets a lot, you know, you could just come, you know, over here to create a track preset. So let's say if I have my audio track set up like so, and, you know, I want it, let's say, you know, this to always be in all of my tracks as a default preset. I want my high pass filter. So at this point I could just, you know, save the track preset. So now there isn't really a way to, you know, and then as you add tracks, you could choose to, you know, add track from track preset. So if I want it to come over here, we could just say using track preset. So I would say if you want a lot of default areas, what I would do is probably just to save it as a template so that every time you start off, you could have, you know, so many tracks for drums, this piano, this synth sound, you know, an organ. You wanted to have, you know, vocals kind of all set up. I would maybe kind of start with a, you know, to start directly with a template. And I think that you'd probably find that a bit faster and easier. So, all right. So let's see. All right. So we have Germany on a Hangout. All right. Vancouver. All right. All right. So I was going through. Sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. So let me just. All right. Okay, so I just see in Cubase, just from Ali, who I believe is. In Cubase, when you hold down Control and use the mouse wheel up, it zooms in, and mouse wheel down zooms out. It's totally okay and true. But the thing is that when you hold down Shift and mouse wheel up to go left and right, mouse wheel up is right, mouse wheel down is left, in spite of the fact that it should be reversed. Shift plus mouse wheel should go left, and mouse wheel down should go right. So, so let's say if I'm here on my timeline and I hold down Control or Command, I could, zoom in and out horizontally. And then if I wanted to navigate, we could use Shift. So, that the direction feels natural to me. So, I don't know of a way to adjust that. But, I think, but I could pass on kind of a user request for being able to, modify or alter the direction of that. But I think that feels kind of natural to me. I'm not sure if it was opposite, if it would feel unnatural. But I think once you hold down the Shift key and use your scroll wheel to navigate, or your control wheel, that it can make sense for you to navigate. But I could understand if maybe you don't, if that feels awkward to you, but I'll kind of pass that on. All right. So I just see a question, and it's kind of a broad question about how to compose a song step by step. Might be out of scope of the particular Hangout, but a lot of people, if I was just kind of starting off, it depends if you're writing for piano, for guitars, what type of songwriter you are, if you're doing acoustic guitar, electric guitar, or what instruments are going to be used. Many people will start off a project, using, different drum loops. So if you wanted to come here, you could just say, okay, I wanted to, have my drum loops, or start off, I think a lot of songs will kind of start off with drums. But you could also add an instrument track and have, maybe start off with Groove Agent SE as a great resource. And, set your tempo, and then you could just say, okay, I want to load up a particular drum part. Determine the tempo. And sometimes people will like this and find it a little more inspiring as opposed to just a click track, to have something that's kind of, maybe provides the genesis or the foundation for the groove. So to be able to have that would be a good. And then at that point, you could come up with chords using the chord track, if you wanted to. If you, play guitars or keyboards really well, you could just kind of play those parts in, but also kind of defining chords using the chord tracks. You could say, okay, we're starting off in E minor, and the next chord I want is, A minor 7th, and, let's do an F sharp major. So, you could just have those chords and be able to audition those chords through different instruments. But it's a little hard to answer how to compose a song step by step. But okay, question. How do you turn a stereo track with audio on one side of the track into a mono track? So let's say if we have, just a stereo track. Let's say let me clear my throat. Hang on. So if let's say a stereo track here. So I'll just quickly add an audio track. Okay, so if you wanted to, if you only have like audio on one particular part of it, you could go to your project menu and just convert tracks, and you'll say multi-channel to mono. You could keep the source tracks, you can mute them, you could delete the source tracks, but now you could just come right over here, do that, and now you'll have your 2 mono tracks, and you could just erase the, come right over here, remove the selected track that didn't have any material in it. So select the track, not the event, but the track itself, and then go to process to convert tracks, and you could choose multi-channel to mono. Okay, if a drummer doesn't play kick and snare together, he's a little missed. How can I quantize? So I assume this is probably for audio. So I'll just jump over to this particular project. So if you wanted to quantize like the live drums, you could come over here. So I will put all of my drums into a folder track. If you wanted to, you could just, come directly here. If it's just for the kick and snare, depending on the parts, you could come right over here to hit points and find kind of the, like where the kicks are. And at this point, I could just open up my quantize panel. So we can say, okay, I want this to be straight 1/8 notes maybe. And I'll say, okay, so now I could just choose to quantize, and I could click on audio warp, and you could quantize just the individual drums like that. So you could do that kind of for kick or snare. So let's say if I wanted to come here to the snare, I could, just kind of adjust the threshold accordingly. So if we have like tracks that are kind of bleeding through, and at this point, again, I could just say, okay, let's go to our audio warp and just choose quantize, and that will kind of adjust the position of the individual notes. Now, sometimes when you do that in context of a live drum set, you may quantize like, the snare in one mic, but you may hear it also in other mics like your overhead, your hi-hats, or even your kick mic for your snare. So if you want to be able to kind of quantize them all together collectively, so to avoid the phasing issues when you move one track and all the other tracks are not really following it. So let's say if we listen to kind of our drums here, and I put on, and let's just put the click track on. And let me just see if I'll just change my click quickly. So, okay, so the thing that every drummer will hate when you do it in a recording session. And let me just get the right sounds. Sorry about that. So I'll use the Steinberg click sounds here. So say it's maybe not as tight with the actual click. So what I could do is I'm going to place all of my drums into a folder track. I could come over here, just kind of find the threshold for, let's say, my kick, snare, and the concept here is just to kind of avoid tracks that are bleeding through. So I want to now find, let's say, my hi-hat, because this is pretty significant kind of at the beginning. Okay, so what we could do now is that these are all in a folder track. We could come right over here to our group editing. And what we want to do is I will just come over here. Let's open up our quantize panel. So you see your quantize settings. You'll see this little E button right over there. We're going to set a priority for our different drums because, and why we do this is, realize that, if we have multiple kick mics, multiple snare mics, those tracks are going to be bleeding through. So if I make an edit just on a snare track, that edit's going to sound off on a snare track versus what's in the overhead mics. And I'm going to assign kind of a priority to these. And as we do this, I'm just going to choose for all these to be sliced. So I'm going to now slice all of these. And it's made, hundreds of little slices. And what I want to do now is I'm just going to say, let's quantize these to 16th notes. And as we quantize those, all those little slices now are going to move. So let me just come over here. So we're going to quantize all of those events. Okay, so I'll just select these here. So we're going to, as we come right over here, we've now quantized, and as we've quantized, it can create all these little gaps. And what we want to do at that point is you could just choose to kind of crossfade all of those gaps. So let's kind of do this from the start again, just so you can see it. So I'll come here, let's set our priorities. And let's do the hi-hat. So quantize, set your quantize value. Or we're going to slice, then quantize, and then crossfade. So as we listen to our drum parts now, and we just put the metronome on. Our whole drum set with the snares hitting in all the different sources, all the different mics, will just be in time with each other. And like this snare fill was rushed, it's coming up. So that's kind of really all you have to do. That's a way of kind of quantizing like a multi-track drum. So all right, good to see Mark Rabin on a Hangout. All right, we see from, I believe it's pronounced said D. Hi, Greg. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for the superb sessions all through the lockdown. You're welcome. It's been a joy to be able to help people and get to meet so many people as well. So looking forward at the end of February, the last Hangout of the month, we'll do kind of a Zoom meetup that will give the kind of the Zoom meeting info during the Hangout. So if you guys are able to make that, make sure you come for the last meeting of the last Hangout of the month. I believe this month it might fall on the 26th, but I could be mistaken. Okay. All right, good to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. All right, reading through comments. Good to see JVI in a Hangout. All right, so we have a question. Is it reliable to use an aggregate device on the Mac? I have an Apollo 8 and a Firewire interface. I just need it for the inputs. Can you explain a bit how the aggregate devices work with Cubase, the one issue with the aggregate devices is it could compound the latency. So I know some people may track with it, and then when you don't need the other inputs, that maybe they'll turn it off. But if you wanted to set up an aggregate device, and this is a Mac thing only, so if you go to, let's say, your utilities, so let me find our windows Greg can have open. All right, so let's say if you go to applications, and then you'll see utilities, and then you'll see an audio MIDI setup. And what you want to do is to click on, and this is pretty unintuitive, click on the plus sign, and then you can create an aggregate device. And what this is going to allow you to do is you can pick which different audio devices that are going to be used for that particular recording. So once you have that aggregate device created, all you need to do in Cubase is come over here to the studio setup, go to the audio system, and then you can select the aggregate device. And that would be kind of a combination of different devices. Some people found maybe the sync not perfect, like latency being compounded. So the latency of the two devices is just kind of added together. But if you could work around that, that's how you could get an aggregate device set up. So hello, can you use Cubase with Zoom on a PC? Can't get audio, thanks. There are some different techniques for doing it. So what I do, like for this Hangout, my setup, and for way too many Zoom presentations I've done this year, is I take there are different audio solutions, software based. I believe if you're doing it on PC, there's something called Voice Meter. That a lot of people use. A lot of people haven't necessarily had good luck with it. There's also, I think, a plugin called Restream that people will put on the output bus, and people have varying levels of success with that. What I do for all my presentations is I have my Cubase audio interface being fed into a Yamaha mixer that has a USB output. My microphone goes into the mixer. That way I could actually hit the mute button if I need to cough or clear my throat or get disrupted by my son or something like that. And then I use the USB audio interface of the mixer for all my communication via Zoom. And that way I don't really have to worry about all my Cubase settings or plugins or sample rate issues. So I'm just taking my microphone plus the analog audio out of my audio interface that Cubase is using into the Yamaha mixer, and I use the audio output from the mixer into Zoom. So that's kind of the best way to do it. And it's generally, most of the operating system audio interfaces, they don't really share the audio too easily. So. Okay, so question, is it possible to copy VST instruments from one track to another in just the mixer window? So within the mixer window, you'd need to kind of probably do it on the main project window. So if you wanted to come here, so let's say if we add an instrument track, let's go ahead and just add two. Let's say groove agent tracks. So, kind of moving, so it's not going to load the instrument, the audio output of the instrument. It could be moved, but anytime that you make a change here, you could see it just reflected. So, and a lot of people will do this while they have the project window and the lower zone mix console. So you could just kind of move it there and see it reflected, but you can't move it like within the mix console, but you can just do that. It's just kind of gets you to the same end line, but it'll just be kind of done in a different area. Okay, good to see Captenergy Music on from Pennsylvania. Okay, good to see Robbie Bowling just says, and while I haven't had time to play with it, I did just upgrade to Cubase 11. Congratulations. All right. So Dead Skin Val is seeing if there's anyone else in a Hangout from Las Vegas. I know we've had like Teddy Riley and some of the Hangouts he's in Las Vegas, and some other people. Peter Rad. We've had also Greg Jafria from Las Vegas. He's been on some of the Hangouts. So. Okay, so question from Robbie Bowling. I did the full download, though. I didn't do all the optional ones. Can I still do those if I desire? And Spectral Layers is a standalone app. That's curious. Why? So yeah, once you have your Cubase 11, you have kind of, like the application, and then you have a number of different downloads that you'll see in kind of the Steinberg download assistant. So I'll just open this up quickly. So you could download any of those, the content and like Spectral Layers 1 at any time during the whole process. So, and why we did this is as people, we would get kind of complaints that the download is so big, but we wanted everyone to make sure that, they had everything that was installed. So all of these different components are, come with Cubase, and they're all licensed for Cubase. So you paid for them. So, all the different instruments, different loop sets, all of those, different components. You have, the Cubase, the core application, but you also have the Spectral Layers, the Howling and Sonic SE, Groove Agent SE. So you can install these at any time. So instead of like having to wait for a 20 gigabyte download, you could get your Cubase, just simply get that up and running, and then download these in the background immediately. And we had people in different parts of the country where maybe they didn't have fast internet connections, and it could take them like, all weekend to download, and would get frustrated that it was like such a large file. So, so that's why there is kind of that change with that. All right, so I see Ted Springman says, incredible. Thanks, Greg. So I think that's hopefully in relation to the macro. So I hope that does the trick for you, Ted. Okay, so from Jan at CubaseIndex.com, the most common question, latency issue. Can Greg show the easiest way to reduce latency on vocal? And what are the most common traps you see most often when you meet a studio engineer? So with latency, we could think of every time that you run a plugin, it has a bit of tax. So think of it like a tax, if you will. So as we are working with plugins, and if you have Cubase Pro, and you could go to the full version, and there's actually a little thing called channel latency that you could activate. So if you go to the upper right hand corner, there's a separate window, and this will show you the latency of everything that's going to be on that particular channel. So let's say on this, I wanted to go to my inserts, and I wanted to start dropping in plugins. So I could come over here. Let's add let's say an EQ. So I wanted to add, let's say, my studio EQ on that. And I wanted to now come over here. A lot of plugins don't incur latency, but a lot of times as we come over here, let's say we wanted to have like a multi-band compressor on our track. So as we do this, we can see that multi-band compressor just on a kick track has introduced 123 milliseconds of latency. Now, let's say if I was doing a vocal and the singer was like, all of a sudden it's like, okay, we're going to add a vocal track. So I'm going to add, let's say, a vocal track. Okay, and let's say the singer wants reverb on their, so let's say if I come here, let's go ahead and add a reverb channel to this. So let's give them a reverence reverb. And we'll come over here, we can add that track. So now when we go to kind of our full screen mix console, this reverb is going to be 11.6 milliseconds of delay. So, and if we go to, let's say, our input output channels, and I'll go ahead and just fix this on the right hand side. And let's say if we have different types of compression here, that let's say, okay, I want a multi-band envelope shaper. At this point, we could see what the latency is. Just bear with me, my son is knocking. Hang on. All right, sorry about that. So as we add these different plugins, we could see this latency. So when we go to, let's say, a multi-band compressor on the end, so every time that we add these plugins, we're going to have this latency that's compounded. So if you're tracking a vocalist, you could go through and make sure that you don't have these plugins. But it's very common that the vocalist will want to have reverb, like a comfort reverb, just to kind of see what it sounds like. So as we're doing this, there's this function where you could choose to constrain the delay compensation. So as we constrain delay compensation, that will bypass any of the plugins that have a lot of latency and basically turn them off or on. So that's a quick way to reduce the latency. Now, if you have an audio interface that has built-in DSP, like I'm using the Steinberg UR24C, what's really handy about these interfaces is you could enable them for direct monitoring. And they have built-in DSP. So I'm going to just change some of my audio connections here. And now that I have my vocal track that has, so let's say if I'm here, and we could say this input is coming from, I'll just add a new track, is coming from this particular input source. You can now see it has built-in effects here. So we could have built-in reverb. with no latency, because the latency is going to be actually it's going to be actually powered directly from your from the hardware itself. So you could actually print with EQ or monitor with the EQ based upon the plugins that you have here. So you could monitor or record with compression and EQ and monitor directly with the reverb with no latency. So those are some ways to kind of get around some of the latency issues that are pretty common. But just think about, if you often don't think about, if you're doing tracking, try to avoid software-based effects, because they could add a lot of latency. So, all right, so let me adjust my settings back here. Thanks for all the great questions. And during the Hangout, if you learned something new, make sure that you hit the like button. And if you aren't subscribed to the Cubase YouTube channel, make sure you hit that you subscribe as well. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on. I see Gareth is indicating that Ted has been workflowed. So maybe with that, the macro. Okay, so we have Nicholas from Sweden. All right. All right, we see it's cold in Texas and Weatherford. All right, my chat field adjusted on me. Okay, so Michael Teams wants people to hit the like button as well. Okay, when opening VSTI, I have no sound on preview. Bail me out, Mr. Greg. Okay, so it could be, so let's say if I am going through, let's say instrument tracks, let's say I want to go through Retrolog. Okay, so let's say if I have Retrolog here, and so let's say if I wanted to just select, so if I double click, that'll load the patch up. So let me just make sure I have my MIDI controller. So let's say I have this patch, and now when I select a different patch, I could just click on it once and that will load the sound up. And this way I could also just it's a cool patch. And let's say if I just hit the down key, so you should be able to kind of preview like that. Now, if you're doing it from, let's if we're in the, so let's go over here to VST Instruments. And let's say if I wanted to go to Pad Shop and I now wanted to go to like Synergy, that when we do this, sometimes it may take like a second for the sound to get loaded up. So let's say now if I select just a different preview, it may just take a second for like if there's samples that need to be loaded. And I'll just come select this sound. And let's say, okay, let's do this sound. Then you could just double click and that will automatically load that particular sound into the instrument just like that. So if you're doing it a different way, Michael, just let me know, and we can get it sorted out for you. All right, so I see that the GJ Mixes It is in Falls Church, so not far from me at all. Welcome to Hangout. You're probably just like 6 or 7 miles from me, maybe 10 miles. Okay. All right, so we see Jan's been busy with CubaseIndex.com, and he's made the preferences and menu tree searchable. So, okay, so we see what exactly does a sensitivity value adjust when you're extracting vocals with spectral layers? Any tips on minimizing artifacts? Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so. All right, so let's say I want to take this and let's go to Spectral Layers. All right, so we'll just go ahead and try with some different levels of sensitivity. And I think sensitivities sometimes could, we'll see if we could hear the difference, but often could, get a little more detailed with like, the reverb and maybe the harmonic overtones. So let's say if we wanted to. That there ain't no point in trying. How many times have I ignored you when it ain't? If you feel the urge to see me, I think we'll have some harmonies. I don't care about you anyway. No, no, no. I don't care about what you've got to say. And I say it to your face. So, every source material, will have, some different, requirements. So I would just kind of, if you're finding that you're having some artifacts, I mean, it's pretty voodoo magic what it does. But, I think out of every one that I've tried, it's, definitely kind of works the best. But it's not going to, there could be some material, that, depending how it's recorded, where it doesn't kind of fall into typical patterns. Like maybe it's, an ambisonics that's, like panned in a really weird spot, or it's, intentionally doesn't have a lot of harmonics in recording. So that's when you could kind of play with some of the sensitivity settings. Okay. So question, can you briefly touch on a few common vocal effects, especially any that might also be applied to monophonic instruments? All right, so let's take a look. So, a lot of times people will use, different, reverb is very common. And one mistake that I often hear people doing is, almost using too many effects. So I think, a lot of times less can be more. So, for vocals, for effects, like you may do, different EQs and compression as needed. I know people will often just use, You know, I see people using kind of, you know, too many plugins a lot of times. And, it's like kind of the guitar player has, 22 pedals and, it's just kind of a mush of noise. But a lot of times, you could do some stuff with, I'll just kind of take a listen to this. I'll show you kind of what I did. So with this, I think I just have reverb. So if you want a very kind of intimate sound. That was okay. Guess all along I was so naive. And then you could also, like, a common one to use would be delays. And it's really nice to have your delays be musically timed. So if you wanted to come here, this is a great trick. And some people go crazy with stereo delays, and it could be distracting. I remember just looking at my friend Clay Oswald kind of shared a project with me, and, or just watching him work once, he's just like, oh, mono delay. It's like, why have the delay fight with the other tracks? Just have a mono delay down the middle. So, so you don't have to get too crazy. So let's say if I have like a quarter note delay. So I want to put this on. Our musical history laid out on the floor. I've got to choose what's mine and what's yours. So a lot of times you could just kind of have. Now you're asking Beatles or Stones. So like for like guitar solos, that's a pretty common thing, but don't just stick to eighth and quarter notes, because you could get like really interesting things, like having a dotted quarter note is a kind of really interesting delay time. Something about that just sounds so wrong. What is too late to start a fight? Take the records that you like. Please stop asking Beatles or Stones. Just leave it alone. And then you could also use like do ducking on delay. So let's say if I'm here, I want to, let's go and just clear that send. I'll show you another one. If you use like the multi-tap delay, there's a great trick that you could do with kind of ducking. So let's say if I just want to do like the multi-tap delay, and I could set my delay time. So let's say, okay, let's do dotted quarter notes. You could have different types of delay characteristics. But at this point, you could just activate the ducker so that the delay. You used to love when I played Hey Jude. So while she's singing, the delay will cut off. And as soon as she stops singing, the delay comes on. That was okay up until now. That was okay. Suddenly it's Beatles. Right, so right at the end of this little phrase. Something about that just sounds so wrong. What is too late to start a fight? To take the records and lay you right. Please stop asking Beatles or Stones. Leave them alone. So when she stops singing, don't know the words. You're scratching the vinyl. You get on my nerves. So as I'll do this maybe at the beginning where you have some stops. So then the delay kicks in when she stops singing. We played our records into the night. I'd turn it up, you wouldn't mind. Up until now, that was okay. Guess all along I was so naive.
Now you're packing boxes, ready to leave. Our musical history laid out on the floor. I've got to choose.
So depending on the part, you know, as soon as, because you don't want to necessarily have the delay kind of constantly be on, because that could be kind of annoying, but just having the delay kind of creep in during the pauses. And, you know, just when you think you hear like delays, you know, if you hear the delay, just back off a little bit. And then it just kind of could add to like really interesting harmonic activity that's going on. And as you have common chord tones and your chord progressions, those delays can kind of cascade and create other harmonies that are really interesting. So give some of those suggestions a try, Ted. Okay. We see Michael Teens giving Robbie Bong congrats on his update to Cubase 11. Okay. So it says in Cubase 11 Pro Win 10, hi Greg, I regularly receive mixed demos and asked to re-sing the vocal over a supplied backing track. Can I generate a top line vocal score from the supplied audio without a pencil? So if you, so let's say if we're here, and you know, if you wanted to, I'll just do a quick part of this as a mix down. So let's say just do an export audio mix down, and let's just do stereo. All right, and I'm just gonna import it into the project. So I'm not sure if you have the vocal that's kind of in the project. You know, kind of what we just did with the spectral layers. Okay, so we'll copy that in. So let's say if we have, you know, something like this. So we have like I'm not sure if you get a 2-track mix with the vocals.
That was
okay, let me just unsolo that track. Sorry.
okay.
All right, so let's. Okay, so I'm going to just do my mix down again. Sorry about that. Operator error on my part. So I'm just going to do just a quick part. Okay, so this is like our mix down file. So we'll see what happens with this. So let's go to our spectral layers. Okay, so now what I could do is just drag the vocal file over. And at this point, let's go into you should be able to pop over here to the very audio. I'll just quickly just do bounce selection here. And now we'll come over here, let's say. Right, and then you could just have kind of your MIDI melody kind of right here laid out for you. So that's how you could kind of extract like the melody in MIDI for score. So let me know if that's what you need to do, Steven. All right, so a question. I have .wave loops in stereo. I want to pitch shift them with the very audio sometimes. Should I convert to mono tracks first? I know about follow chords, but want to use very audio. And Hangout / index are great. So if you have a lot of different loops, so I'm not sure if you need to do it in very audio, if there's a specific reason that you're doing it in very audio, because very audio is really designed kind of specifically for, you know, vocal tuning, but you could do pitch shifting of your audio other ways. So let's go ahead and take a look. So let's say if, you know, if you have a drum loop here, so let's just, so let's say if I have this drum loop and I wanted it to, you know, go up, you know, we could just choose to transpose just by selecting the events. So now we could have the drum loop play back. So now when it gets here, it's going to go up a semitone. Or we could go up more if you want. So you could do stuff like that in real time. So, you know, very audio isn't necessarily mono or stereo, but it's more monophonic, meaning it's not really intended to work with chords. So it's really, you know, for monophonic parts. So I'm not sure. Let us know if you need to do it in very audio for a specific reason, but I think that is probably a faster process. But if you have another workflow approach that you need to accomplish, let us know, Sir N68. So I just see a question. So could you apply groove on this quantize? So I think this is probably going back to our drum question. So, you know, once you have kind of, you know, the groove. So let's say if I wanted to take this particular, the feel of this loop, I go to my hit points. You know, when you go, I'll just kind of add a quick, so I'm going to come here and I'm just going to say create groove from that. So when you go to your quantize panel, you know, you could see, you know, your typical rhythmic values, but you could also just quantize it based on different grooves as well. So at that point, you could just, you know, select any quantized value, including different groove quantizes that you have. All right. So a question from Ted. Does the VST3 have a way to automatically crossfade any overlapping MIDI notes to reduce blur of slow release times on faster passages? So, MIDI itself isn't really going to allow you to do crossfades, and often it could be up to the sample library of how it's going to, so a lot of times when you do, let me just add a quick instrument track here. Yeah, let's just go for a string patch from Iconica. So at this point, you may, it could be how the samples are set up. So let's say if I go to edit these particular, now when I do something very fast in regards to this, it may not, let me just, so if you're kind of playing, let's say maybe a sustain sound, and that may not stick as much. But you may just have to kind of select the right, the right articulation. So, and like if I wanted to come here, let's say, okay, sorry for hitting the mic. It's annoying. So as I hit the key switch here, and you can see the yellow notes at the bottom on the left-hand side of the keyboard. So that articulation could speak for this rhythm, but doesn't necessarily work when you go to marcato or to legato. So, it really could depend. It's not the MIDI message that's sounding it, but it's more the audio portion. So if you wanted to. So, but depending upon the library, you could say, okay, I wanted it to be, tremolo, you have your different articulations like we see here. So if you want it to be, just different types of, so if I want it to be spiccato, and let's say the next one here, I wanted this to be, we could just choose, swell long, so I could go. So it's not necessarily the MIDI, that's going to be fading in and out, but it's really, part of the, with VST3, you do have a lot of options, but to kind of get the results, I think you'd want to make sure that you have the right articulations and that, or the right samples loaded for the particular articulations that you want. Okay, question. How can I change the BPM of a project without changing the pitch of the audio tracks? All right, so let's say if I'm here, I'll just go back. Let's say we have our rock band. I'll activate this project. So we want to make sure that, that the audio files have kind of a tempo stamp. So if you've recorded the audio, you'll see that they'll all kind of have a tempo stamp based on the tempo that you're working with. And we could go to your audio pool, or under media, go to your pool window. you could select all the files and make sure that they're in musical mode. And you can see musical mode here. You could also select those on individual tracks just by seeing it from the info line. But once all the tracks are in musical mode, I can now just come right over here and say, okay, I want this to be 92 BPM from 100. Or let's try 108. Let's try 144. Let's try 78. And if you have just tempo changes, it would automatically follow the tempo changes as well. So just put it into musical mode, and then once you kind of know what the tempo is, and then you could just, once the tracks are in musical mode, again, either from the pool or from the info line, you're all set. All right, you see John Costigan is seeking Texas sunshine in Kenosha, Wisconsin. So we have a question. What is the shortcut for moving from certain measure to next one? So if you wanted to, you could just, so I think we go under transport. So let's see, a lot of people, you could do it kind of, based on events, but I think we could, there's a kind of nudge or go forward one measure key command. So you could do these nudge, I believe, but let's. Let me just look up +1 bar. So I think you just set it up for nudge 1 bar, and then, you could activate just like that. So let me know if that makes sense. Okay, so let's just read through some of the comments here. So we have lots of questions to get to. All right, we're seeing Mark Rabin sharing some of his processing tips. Okay, so question. Why pros like Hans Zimmer not using Nuendo over Cubase? Is Nuendo not the ultimate production version of Cubase? Why someone shouldn't choose Nuendo over Cubase besides price, of course? I think for Hans, he's been in Cubase for a long time, and, he's doing the music part. And like sound design, but he's not the one that's doing the dialogue, recording the dialogue replacement. He's generally not doing all of the mixing for the for the movie with all the dialogue, the sound effects, the music. He's not doing. He's delivering, I believe, quadraphonic mixes, so he's not delivering Dolby Atmos mixes. So all the functions that Hans and many other composers need are in Cubase, but it's often like projects that they hand off to finish compositions to. Those will, there's a good chance those would be mixed in Nuendo. If you're doing stuff for games, that makes a big difference as well. So those types of work, so for his work requirements and what he needs, he's able to do everything in his Cubase. So he doesn't need to necessarily jump to Nuendo. It's a question. Hey, Greg, thanks for all the info. Is there a key command for talkback on and off toggle? Okay, so for the talkback on and off, I don't think that there's a key command for it, but you can create one, I'm pretty sure. So let's come over here to the key commands. You'll find it under the control room. And you'll see talkback on and off. So that's a keyboard shortcut that will turn on the talkback on and off. So I forgot to ask why the downmix presets turn red. I don't think it's an overload, but I'll remember to ask next time I talk to some of my colleagues in Germany on that. Okay, so hailing from Houston, Texas, from 803 Music Group. So, my brother lives in Houston. So my question, can you go through the collaboration features and how it should be properly set up? Also, how reliable it is. So I think this is probably dealing with the VST Connect. I've had great luck with it. So if you come over here, you want to make sure first that, the person that you're working with will just simply have, they will have a VST Connect performer. So it's free for Mac or PC, or I think $5 for iOS. So they could download that. Make sure that the versions that you have in VST Connect are both the same version numbers. So then once you're here, basically what you do is you log in. You could search for your client, or you could choose to give them a code. I don't have my second computer hooked up right now, but you could log in basically through your My Steinberg account. You would then be able to set up the Q mix. So you set up your headphone mix so that it gets sent out to the performer. So you hit record, the signal from your Cubase gets sent to the performer. They'll hear that signal along with their input source from their audio interface. And again, they do not have to be running Cubase, just the VST Connect performer, free for Mac or PC, or available for iOS. And once the signal goes out to them, that signal will then be placed directly onto a track in Cubase. So you hit record. You may notice it'll take maybe a couple hundred milliseconds, depending on the internet speed, to go out to the performer musician, and then to bring that back in. And you could see them over the webcam as you do this. Now, to greatly simplify all the routing, you could come right over here to VST Connect, and then you could just say create the VST Connect, and that will automatically add the channel, do all the routing and the busing for you. So it works pretty well. So it's helped out a lot of people during the pandemic. I think ABC or NBC's The Voice from this summer, they were able to do the whole show because of VST Connect. So there wouldn't have been, during the pandemic, there wouldn't have been able to do the show at all without it. So Okay. All right, so we see Millard Brown is photographing expensive guitar effects for online listing. So, all right, my chat field just jumped on me. Bear with me while I scroll back. See, I have lots of questions in my future. Okay, found my spot. Okay, so see from CJ, Greg, thanks for the info and the delay added for singer, only just as a guide for her. So, okay, just reading through comments. So, people sharing some of their processing chains. So I just see question how I want to learn about Cubase. Where could I learn it from? So you really all you have to do is, here on this stream, you could just ask questions, anything that you don't like. There's on the YouTube, on the Cubase YouTube channel, there's probably hundreds of different tutorial videos. You could search, and if you have like particular questions, then you want to see it kind of in this format, but you're looking for a particular thing, go to the cubaseindex.com, and you could just search there. Okay, so we see from Gamera21. Hi, Greg. Just want to say thank you for all these nice hangouts, which really help. More room for creative musical moments. That's great. All right, and we have Razzle from Denmark saying hi. Thanks for joining us. Okay, I think I gave Gareth a melody, a Gregolody. So I get to give him all these moments of inspiration for little sparks so he could write songs. Then I get to play bass on him too. So, okay, so we have a question. How can automate the decay in the sampler track, trying to do the decay trick on hi-hats? So let's come over here. So you can do that directly with the quick controls. So let me just find some. Okay, so let's say I wanted to do this. So I'll create a sampler track, and now. So I'm not sure which particular, but if you wanted to come here, we could also just say, okay, as I play this, you could go to your quick controls, and you may have to just kind of enable the filter and make sure the LFO is on. And then you could use, your decay amount here. But once these are also set up, you could you could kind of set the speed of different filters here. But, you could also just come over here and let's come over here to our audio inserts. So even without that, if you wanted to just, if you go to Dynamics, this is a plugin that you could that you could use to adjust decay, like your ADSR, if you wanted to. So, but check out the different parameters here in the quick control section. You could drive those through MIDI controllers that are configured in your studio menu to studio setup. And then you could just see like your VST or track quick controls, and you could adjust your controller to drive those. All right. All right, so we have someone checking in from Bangladesh. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. I want to keep my stereo out and group channels to the right in the mix console. Okay, so let's say if I add 10 audio tracks, and let's say I have group tracks here kind of smattered throughout. Okay. So let's say I have input channels, I have audio group channels, and I always want to keep my, in the mix console, I always want to keep like my stereo out and my groups anchored to the right. So in the lower zone mixer, we could go to visibility and then click on zones. So you see 3 dots. So this way I could say I want group 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's say under inputs, outputs, my stereo out. And then it'll be just anchored directly on top. So let's come here and I'm just going to add some more audio tracks. So now as we scroll those particular tracks, the rest of the tracks will just, kind of stay right there. And those tracks will be on the main mixer. On the larger mixer, you could have kind of independent. So you just want to click on zones here. And again, you could say, I want like my stereo out to always be anchored to the right. And now if you want groups also just anchored to the right, and let's say, I want audio 1, let's say this is my lead vocal channel. I want this anchored on the left. We can now kind of create a split console. So you can have like input channels or my go-to channel plus all my groups or effects and master, just kind of anchored on the right-hand side there. So again, just kind of come over here and go to the zones, and you may have to be in visibility and then click zones at the bottom, and on the main project window, visibility and then zones again. See, kind of the comment on Spectral Layers from Miller Brown is sensitivity equals how much it cares about your project. So, okay, so we have Willie checking in from Boston, joining late, but yeah, feel free to ask your questions live if you want. We'll probably go to 5 o'clock-ish Eastern. So then I have to go back and do the index later tonight. So get an hour break and then have a virtual PTA meeting for my son's school. All right. All right. So, hi, Greg. Any thought of the big issue on sync problems with the external instrument virus TI? I know it's out of Cubase, but maybe some pointers. Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact issue, but I know that there's a lot of instruments that don't properly sync. Sometimes I know some instruments don't respond well to tempo changes if you're kind of doing MIDI clock. But I don't know a particular issue with the virus TI. I know kind of a general, general issues of many external devices not responding correctly to MIDI clock. So, and that's why a lot of people tend to use software instruments. So, okay. Okay, so we have from the Tuba Guy, good to see you on Hangout. I have two projects with this exact same tracks, and I want to copy one complete mixer state to the other project. Possible? Thanks. All right, so let's say I'm here. I have everything set up. And this works really well if you have kind of like your different, kind of identical with the same exact tracks. So let's say, okay, I have all these and I got my EQs going on here. So select all of the tracks in the project. So let's say, okay, I want to I'm just going to hide my input channels quickly. Okay, so let's say I have all of these tracks, and then if you go to the little drop-down menu here, let's see. So let's say if I just kind of select these tracks, just see if it's not sampler tracks. All right, so once you're here, so I'm going to select all the tracks. You'll see this little drop-down menu where you could save selected mixer channels, and this will just be stored as what's called a VMX file. And that VMX file could just be imported into other projects. So you could just simply import that VMX and then just drop it. And then once you have those tracks selected, just come right over here, choose load selected channels. And then at that point, you could just load the selected channels. All right. So I see a comment from Pablo, and the beast of delays has appeared. So it's probably the multi-tap delay. All right, so you see from the DJ mixes it. Okay, that just blew my mind. Never knew you could do all that in Cubase. You could do lots of things in Cubase. That's pretty cool. All right. So I just see this probably to the song Beatles and Stones. So who is Andrea Gregg? So I think she was co-writer on the song Beatles and Stones. And I think Uninvited, another project I used, which I got from my friend Vince Melamed, who's a longtime friend of mine, who's a wonderful songwriter. So occasionally I hit him up for projects I could use for demonstration purposes like this, and he always has such great songs. He's a wonderful writer and wonderful keyboardist. Toured with everyone from Jimmy Buffett. He was kind of touring with the Eagles in the '70s, and Roseanne Cash, and just played with Bob Dylan, and just a real journeyman keyboard player and just a fabulous writer. So someone I think he was collaborating with. So, but yeah, check out Vince Melamed. He's a wonderful songwriter. And Michael Team says, hit the like button, maybe win a date with Andrea. So I'll pass that on to Vince. So. All right, so we see that Patrick is enjoying Cubase 11. All right, that's good. Okay, so we have a question. When we quantize with a groove, does it affect all of the tracks or just that track? So whatever track that you choose to select, that you select and do the quantization on, that will be affected, but it won't do all tracks unless you have all of the tracks selected. All right, so we have a question. Is Spectral Layers in 10 or 11? So with Cubase 11, you get Spectral Layers 1, but you can buy Spectral Layers Elements. I think in the US it's $79, and maybe the full version of Spectral Layers Pro is going to be like $299, but it's a pretty amazing program. Okay, so this is going back to Sir N68, who asked about kind of bass loops in Very Audio. Says, hi Greg, it's difficult to explain about stereo loops. I want to work in Very Audio. The monophonic pan stereo bass grooves mainly. Sometimes the transpose goes wrong. I figured maybe I'm wrong. So sometimes if you have a bass line, let's go ahead and take a look at it. So I'm just going to jump over here. Let me just talk to my son real quick. He's knocking. Bear with me. I think his school day is done. All right, I'm back. So let's go ahead and find a quick bass line. So I think there's some. Okay, so we have this bass line here. All right, so let's say if I want to do this in Very Audio. Sorry, you may hear my son playing piano in the background. Okay, so I will come over here and let's just do a quick Very Audio on this. So even though it's stereo, you could do it, but I'll just come here to the Very Audio. Okay, so all right, and let's say I just wanted to be able to take that. And let's say I could even just kind of drag that up a little bit. And let's go ahead and just say we'll drag the pitch of that down on this one. So I'll just grab and do kind of different drops. Or if you now wanted to take, you know, all of the notes and just let's go ahead and transpose. So let's say I'll take that and let's transpose this. So that way you can do kind of, you know, different elements. And if you wanted this to follow a chord track, so let's say, like we're in the key of D. So let's say if I wanted to come here, let's just add a chord track. We could choose, now that we've done the very audio, I could just kind of come over here. So let's say we'll start in D. And maybe at this point, I wanted to jump up to E minor. So let's see. And we could tell this to now follow the chord track. So we'll just say maybe root notes for bass. So you can... So once you do have that, you can, you know, split the notes and move it around kind of as you see fit. So that's, you know, some of the different ways that you could do that. So maybe that helps. Okay, so see question for Sable Winners. Good to see you on the Hangout. Did once in Adobe Audition how to surgically separate, mix down wave into parts, then convert each to MIDI tracks, apply instrument for each, generate parts, chord lead sheets, minimum version. I used to have two separate softwares to achieve this before. You know, so what you can do, and I'll just jump back to this project here and I'll revert. So, you know, Cubase isn't designed to do polyphonic detection. So there's a lot of stuff that's still a little off with algorithms for that. I don't think it's quite reliable, but, you know, if you want it to jump here, so I'll just revert this. But, you know, with the spectral layers, so I'm not sure if Audition allows you to do all the MIDI, you know, coming up with the chords from the audio. But let's say if I have kind of a... So if I take this and we go to the Spectral Layers. So with the Spectral Layers Pro, with Cubase, you get Spectral Layers 1 with Cubase 11. But you could also upgrade to the... You know, or if you have Spectral Layers Pro and you go to Audio to Extensions, what this will allow you to do is under Process, you could just choose to unmix the stems. And now that we're doing this, we'll watch the progress here. All right, and almost done. So now it's kind of, we see that the different stems are kind of broken down. So if I wanted to now, from my multi-track, mute the bass. Or mute the drums.
that if you feel the urge to see me, well, you best pretend you're blind.
So if I wanted to just, take the bass and drag it over, I could do that. And at this point, we could do different, very audio work, just kind of like what we did, kind of breaking it down. But it's not going to like take the piano parts and automatically extract the chords. But I don't think there's much that does that. Or I think there's some programs that attempt to do it. All right, good to see Jazz Dude on a Hangout. Okay, so a question, this would be part one. How do I resolve conflict between the project setup in different sample rate than the sound card sample rate? Example, project set sample rate is 44.1 kilohertz, 24-bit, while the audio interface is 48K, 24-bit. So a lot of times if you have projects that are at the wrong sample rate, what you need to do, is the easiest way to do it. And some audio interfaces will switch sample rates. Sometimes you have to restart your DAW and the program isn't designed to do sample rates. But for the most part, really all you have to do is you go to the project setup. So you go to the project menu to project setup. And now at this point, you'll see the sample rate here. So you could just, switch the sample rates directly there. And then you'll get prompted if the files need to be converted. So sometimes you may have to go into the audio interface drivers, like a little control panel app, and something like a little utility, and here you could, depending on how it's implemented within the audio interface, you could just set the sample rate there. Most of the time, Cubase can kind of switch the sample rate, but not every audio interface allows that to be done. Okay. See if there's a part two to that. All right, so. All right, so I think my chat jumped on me. All right, so I think I'm back. All right, and we see Agent K on a Hangout, who's always gracious enough to do some moderation for us. And Neurotic Nexus has joined. All right. All right, so Sub 403 wants everyone to hit the like button. Neurotic Nexus asked if he missed a free plugin. So yeah, we gave a free 32-channel Nuage system away from Yamaha earlier in the Hangout. So sorry you missed it. Just kidding. Anyway. Okay. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, still reading through comments here. All right, so we have Michael Marshall from, is it Ilminster, Somerset, UK? We used to have a guy who worked at Steinberg named Michael Marshall. He used to do our trade show booths in the early days. Smart guy. Okay, so I just see question, is that anchor group feature only available in 11 or is it in 8 as well? We're going to send it to you, Chase. So when you open up your Cubase next time, it will be there. So it is a feature that is available in version 8. It came with the new mix console in Cubase 7 when it was redesigned. So. Okay, we have a question. I've created a project logical editor preset to trim the audio using a keyboard shortcut. However, it only trims from the end of the clip. Is there a way to do it from the start as well? Okay, so there is kind of a function that's inside of Cubase, and it's kind of contingent. Depends where the cursor position is. So let's say I'm here. So people I know will make like, project logical editors to basically take the end of this file and move it to the cursor. So we could go to your edit menu and under range, you'll see cut head and cut tail. So if I say cut tail, that just cuts that ending part directly to the project cursor. And conversely, instead of having to do a project logical editor preset, you could just say we want to cut head. So we'll just come right there, and that will cut the start position from the beginning of the file right to the cursor there. So if I want to now just come there and cut head or tail again, I could just, again, under range, cut head, and then you're kind of all done right there. So give that a try, Alex, and let us know if that does the trick for you. All right, we see it's cold in the Netherlands and apparently frozen. All right, how should I use VariAudio in Cubase 8? So, if you have, I'll just get in our project open here. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to use VariAudio and this came in version 5 and there's a pretty significant improvement with Cubase 10 when it came out. So I will go to kind of the full screen editor. So you want to use VariAudio, it will need to do an analysis first. So you just kind of click here. So some of the things that you could do with the VariAudio, so let's say as we're kind of playing along here. So one of the things that you could do, I think you need to hold down in version 8. It might be Control or Command, and you could just kind of select the notes. And this is one of the things that had changed, where it'll just automatically kind of snap to pitch. So if you find that one note is a little flat or sharp, you could just come directly and be able to adjust like that. Let me just check with my son. He's knocking real quick. Hang on. Okay, sorry about the interruption. So, when you want to, you could just kind of come over here and, as you make adjustments, you could have it snap. And I think it's a modifier key, maybe Control or Command or Alter Option, and that will kind of just snap the events. When you see, you also will see a straighten pitch. So as we want it to come here, you could say, here we call it straighten curve. So if the vibrato is a little too wide for you, you can just kind of tame the vibrato and also just adjust so like if a note is a little bit flat, you could go to quantize pitch, and that will take like an entire phrase of notes and be able to, let's say if I want to take that, we could just choose to quantize the pitch, and that will just kind of move the particular notes to the nearest pitch. So those are some of the things you could do to get started with your Vari Audio in Cubase 8. And there's a bunch of new features and workflow enhancements added with version 10. All right, so Werner's sending best wishes from Bavarian country, Germany. I've never made it to Bavaria area. I've always been in Hamburg, but I want to go there and just on vacation. So thank you, Werner. Okay, question. Is it possible to change the color of the cursor in the score editor? The default appears to be white clear. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. So seems like the cursor here, make sure that didn't like that. Hang on just 1 second. Sorry about that. All right, I'm just going to restart Cubase here real quick. Sorry about that. But it seemed like the cursor was kind of the same default color. Okay, so let's say if I'm here in the score editor, and let me just set my connection so you guys could hear. So when I'm here, I see kind of the play position is being black. And my cursor is black on the score editor. So, I'm not sure if you're using maybe a different tool, but if you have the object selection, it seems to be black for me, but let me know, Yeppy01, if that looks different than what you've done. Okay, or what you're seeing. Okay, so we have a question. I've seen you break out a MIDI part from Groove Agent onto a MIDI track to edit, rearrange the pattern. Is that possible with audio loops, hit points, with the sampler track, or some other method? So there are a couple things you do, within Groove Agent for this type of thing. So if I wanted to, let's see if I have it up. So if we wanted to, or we could do this with the sampler track as well. So I'll show you in the sampler track. We'll start off maybe with sampler track. So I will just. Okay, so I'm just going to drag that in. So now that I have my sampler track, let's say if I wanted to listen to, let's say that's the sample. But we could choose to kind of do some very creative stuff when we go to the slice. And you could set these by transient, by grid, transient plus grid, or manually put the slices in. Now, once we have the slices selected, you see this little MIDI icon here. So now I could drag and drop that icon directly into the project window. And let's say now what I'm going to do is just play back the sample. And we see that this is just playing back each of the slices. But when we look at it, it's actually just going to be like, regular MIDI notes. So I'm going to just look at the velocities here. Let's say I wanted to do some variations on a theme here. So I'm going to just take the first note and, of course, scientifically come right over here. And I'm just going to use my arrow keys to and so just and we'll see how this sounds. So I could get just kind of the same I could get just a variation. And we could do this with Groove Agent as well. So that's our original loop. So that way you could kind of have the same groove, but just kind of different actual aspects and different variations quite easily. So that's the way you could do that with the sampler track in version 11. It's one of the new features of the sampler track 2, or kind of do it inside a Groove Agent, very similar process. Okay. So I just see from Patrick W. is wondering if the internet's lagging, that I'm cutting out. So I'm not sure if it seems like my stream strength seems to be okay on my end. So, but I'm not sure. Maybe sometimes refreshing your browser might help. Okay, so we have a question. Hello, I'm using Artist 11, 2 monitors with plugins showing on monitor 2. If I click outside any plugin, black space of monitor, all plugins go away. Can I change that somewhere? Thanks, Greg. So if we do this, and let's say we have a plugin on a particular track, so I will come here to this track. Let's just open up an insert or two. All right, so say I get to frequency, EQ. So I have this, and now when I click, we may notice that this plugin doesn't disappear, but if I now click, the plugin disappears. So what did I do differently? If you, on the plugin itself, you'll see towards the top, if you right click, you just want to enable always on top. So once that is turned on, I could click elsewhere and the plugin will stay on top. If that is unchecked, now when I click elsewhere, that plugin kind of goes and just ends up kind of being behind. You can still pull it up, but it just kind of gets away. So, and just be aware of that. Some people get a little crazy, and because I've seen some people have 50 windows set to always on top, and they wonder why it looks cluttered. So, but try just right clicking into plugins and just choose always on top, and then that should take care of that for you, Bob. All right. So I just see my Cubase 11 crashes when I exit out of chord track using the chord symbols. So I don't think I've had that issue. So let me just add a quick chord track. So once I'm in here, let's say if I go to like chord assistant, where you can see kind of our circle of fifths. Then if I want to add another chord, so mine doesn't behave that way. One thing you may want to try is, you could start up your Cubase, like after you launch the program, hold down Alt Control Shift or Command Option plus Shift, and you could start Cubase in kind of a diagnostic mode where you could kind of temporarily disable the plugin preferences and see if that changes the behavior for you. Okay. Okay, so I just see, so question, is it possible to lock live pitching notes that I play from MIDI keyboard to one key an entire project, not only in piano roll? Okay, so let's say if you wanted to play, so let's go ahead and just add an instrument track. Okay, so let's say now. So, so we'll say we want to lock the live pitching notes I play from a MIDI keyboard to one key an entire project, not only in piano roll. So if you want, I'm not sure if it's one musical key or one key as in one note. If it's like in a key of, C major or A minor, or particular key like that, I'll come here to my input transformer, and we're gonna say function. We want to filter notes unequal to value 1 is let's see, I think we could do this with this. All right, so let's choose value 1 is, I think we could do scale correction in here. I think that there is a scale correction mode in here. Let me just see if I could. I don't think it's one of the presets. But you could also do it through live transpose. So let's say if I have a chord track, I'll show you another way of doing this. So so let's say I have my chord track here, and I just want to set my scale. So let's say I want to do a G major, and now when I come to my, let's say my sound here, I could go to the chords and go to live input. Let's turn it on, and I could say now scales. So now when I hit like an F and an E together, it's only gonna, if I hit F and E, it's only gonna allow me to play notes that are gonna be directly within that particular scale. So set the scale from the chord track, and at that point you could have each of the tracks just follow the live input. You could do it so it's only playing within the chord at the time, or only within the particular scale. So okay, so I just see a question. I believe this is probably dealing with the mix console of can you anchor that permanently? So if you want to anchor, you know, the mix console settings are going to be stored within a project, but what many people will do is just to start off with a template, and you could have that within your template so that the different tracks are anchored accordingly. So according to Sub 403, no scam, no lie. Hit the like button and a virtual Greg will appear in your studio. So okay, so just see a question. Is there a room calibration build in Cubase similar to SonarWorks or Trinnov? So there isn't one that's built into Cubase. So a lot of people are using SonarWorks. But Cubase doesn't have kind of built-in room calibration. So we'll let the third-party companies have that. Okay, now my chat jumped on me. Bear with me. Well, I jump back. Okay, so I found my spot. All right, so we see Sub 403. He wants a nuage. So okay. Okay, so let's see. Question: when add some files from right panel, MIDI audio, etc., is located as the last one in the bottom after all tracks. Even if selected track on the top, how to change that, please? All right, so let's say if I want to add an audio track here, so I'm just going to click on. So let's say if I add an audio track here, I'll add two, and I have this track selected. I hit add track. So they were added directly underneath. So let me add a instrument track below this. So let's go ahead and make it retrolog. So that should go right above slice loop as it does. So when I've seen, I think sometimes what could make a difference is if you add the track and let's say if all these are in a folder. So let's say if I move all these selected tracks to the new folder, and then I add an audio track now. So let's say I'll just add audio track. Even that still kind of works. So I think some tracks may be added out of the folder when also you add like an effects channel track or a group track. You'll get this little indication here for the folder setup. So if you choose inside folder, this will place this into the groups folder at the very bottom of the project. But if I am here and I choose to add a group or effects channel and choose outside of the folder, that would place it below the selected track. So some tracks may be contingent upon if it's in a folder. So maybe if you have the folder selected, let's see if we add an audio track, then it goes kind of below the folder track. So make sure that you don't have like a folder selected by accident, and that if you're adding effects or group channels that you choose to add them outside of the folder, which probably should be relabeled to to below selected track. Okay, so we're seeing dinner discussions going on. Okay. Okay, so we're seeing that Germans like Italian food. So, all right, so more discussion of. Okay, so neurotic. So I guess this for. Okay, so I saw a question towards Jazz Dude about a video card. Okay. Okay, so question from Robbie Bowling. Most of the drum samples I use, I own. Is there a way to make them a preference in the sampler? So I'm not sure. What you could do if it's like a favorite folder, Robbie, is like a lot of times I know people will have like a go-to, like maybe their studio kit that they've sampled or something like that. And if you wanted to have access to those quickly, what you could do is come over here to your file browser and just kind of look wherever you have those particular files. So let's say if you have samples, so say, okay, I want to go to my acoustic agent, VST, and I wanted to take a look at particular sounds. What you could do is just kind of right click on it and choose add favorite. And at this point, you could just go to your favorites column and it'll show up there. Anytime, if you've already made sample tracks out of them, so let's say I'll just go back to my sampler track project. So let's say I have a sampler track here and I just want to drag in, like, even from at this point you could right click and do a save track preset. So I'll just call this Robbie. And then when you go to like track presets, you know, you could come over here and you'll see track presets and then you'll see sampler. And, you know, you could just look through all the different track presets there, but you could also just go to user. So if it's not under, so just go to user and then you'll say, okay, let's go to track presets and sampler, and then I could just see Robbie, and then I could just drag and drop, and that's my track preset with the same files. So, and that could be all of your drum samples as well. Okay, seeing some discussion between DisplayPort and HDMI for monitors. So, okay. Okay, just going through some of the discussion here. Okay, so from Bob, hey, I checked a couple of the FabFilter plugins. The always on top was checked. I unchecked them, and presto, no matter where I click in a monitor, they stay. You're a wealth of knowledge. Thanks. All right, that's good. I'm glad you got that sorted out. I know, like, little things like that could be frustrating when you don't know you know, I had a friend describe it as you're one mouse click away from happiness. So it was a great expression I stole from him. All right. So I just see, by the way, my YouTube said this was to start at 6 p.m., but you are here now as a clock off somewhere. So I know we started depending what time zone you're in, but we kind of always try to do it at the same time for consistency. So we usually start 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern time, so that's 10 a.m. In California Pacific time. It's going to be, I think, let's see, 6 p.m. in the UK, 7 p.m. in Central Europe. So we try to be kind of consistent. All right, so we see Sub 403 has used the SonarWorks headphone reference and it's helped him out a lot. That's great to know. Okay, reading through comments. You see a comment from Jazz Dude. Oh my God, we made Greg stream into a food channel. Sorry, Greg. That's fine. I like reading all discussions. One day I'll get to actually participate in discussions and not read them like 30 minutes afterwards. So. So I just see, hi Greg, is there a way to use MIDI input to transpose the project playback during playback or record? So let's see if we could, I'm not sure if we could, let's take a look and find out. So this probably be a, never tried this. If it did it, I would think it might be in generic remote. So let's say I'll just kind of hit. Let's see if this button is transmitting. Okay. So I'm going to try this button and maybe command. Right. Trying to think of a way to do it kind of in real time for your MIDI and audio. I know we could use a transpose track, but I don't know of a way of having the MIDI to kind of set the transpose track. Let me just take a look. Maybe I can find something in the key commands, see if it's... All right, that's just for MIDI. Yeah, so I don't know a way to address it through a keyboard shortcut or macro, but if you want to email me, I'll kind of keep seeing if I could come up with something that might, let me just add out of curiosity, just a transpose track. Yeah, so I don't know of a way to do that, but I'll see if I can figure out a way. It may not give you kind of the, as accurate a result. Okay. Okay, so let me just, all right, so a question from Jan, cubaseindex.com. All right, so let me get this set up. All right, so question, in a project, some tracks are muted. If I accidentally mute stereo out and then unmuted stereo out, all my previous muted tracks will be unmuted. How do I recover as before muted stereo out? Okay, so let's give it a shot. Okay, so let's say I have a couple of tracks muted. Okay. So So let's say I muted my stereo out now. All right, and then we go to unmute, and everything is unmuted. But let's go ahead and try. We do this and mute. I'm gonna try just the Alt Z. So I thought maybe that this would. So let me just see if we can do this. And so if we do that, that's going to mute everything. We unmute, all the mutes are kind of undone. So I thought maybe that the mute status might be part of the mix console history, but it doesn't look like it is. I don't think there's any preferences to change that, and there's all sorts of different philosophies on muting of tracks. So let's just I don't think this will do it, but give it a shot. See if there's any modifier key tricks. I think it's kind of following the signal flow. But let me just see if there's anything else. Yeah, I could do some more research on that, Jan, if you want to email me. But yeah, I wonder if there's. I'm trying to see if there's a quick like modifier key that may alter that behavior. But I think because it's all kind of feeding the same signals, that once you unmute kind of the master thing, but I can see where you may want it to be turned on. So you may, if you're kind of selectively muting from the mix console, you know, perhaps maybe just mute the events instead. And then, you know, if you do that, then yeah, but I could do some more research on that, Jan, if you want to email me. All right, so see, Greg, we have lots of LE and AI elements users in the Discord. Can I install and load any of those versions with my Cubase Pro 11 key? I have no clue how limited those versions are. So generally, the Cubase Pro license doesn't work for the previous generations, but I might be able to, if you want to send me an email, maybe we could, I could figure something out. But go ahead, send me an email. All right, good to see Nick on a Hangout. All right, so we have a question. Greg, do you know why my Focusrite Solo Generation 2 shows no latency when choosing the ASIO driver 0.00 both on input and output, but it works? I'm puzzled. I don't have a lot of experience with the Focusrite interfaces, but if it's working for you, I'm sure that it's fine. Sometimes some of the interfaces just don't report the latency, and maybe you see it in the control panel for the audio interface. So okay, so we see a question from Nick. What's the difference between save as and save new version? So I think the save new version just automatically gives it a name, whereas the save as may prompt you for the name. Let's go ahead and check it out, see if my suspicions are accurate. So I will just come over here. Okay, so now if I come here, I'm going to just save the project. All right, so let's say if I save as new version. All right, so when we do this, it's going to be Nick's underscore 01. But if I want to do a save as, it's going to prompt me for the name. So I think it's kind of the same, but one, if you have to just kind of, if you're firing off from a keyboard shortcut. So I think that, if you just want to hit one button and have it save a new separate distinct version, that it will just kind of increment the name with like a 0, 1, whereas you do a save as, that it prompts you for the name for you to enter. So I believe that's the difference, but so give that a shot and see if that makes sense. I could do some more research on it, but I think that's what the difference is. Okay, so we see Bob who's asking about 6 p.m. that he was in Central Illinois. So yeah, so it should be starting around noon. Central Illinois, which I believe, and I know Chicago's in. I believe Illinois is in Central Time Zone. So. Right. All right, so my timeline jumped on me. All right, so I think I'm okay. All right, good to see Pablo's back from dinner. So dumb question perhaps, but do TVs work as well as monitors, and can you still watch TV on them if you want? So yeah, a lot of people do that. So it used to be that the computer monitors were like much higher resolution than TVs, kind of pre-HD TVs, and now with 4K TVs and some people getting into 8K TVs, that that the TVs have high enough high enough resolution to look really good. So lots of people use TVs as their monitors. So you can see other people. So Michael Teams has a 46-inch for his main monitor. So Okay, so we see Michael Pierce, a question someone may be able to answer, only just seen this recently. It seems that when I engage listen bus on a track, it bypasses all inserts. Am I going mad, or is this a thing? So I think it may bypass some of the processing, but let's go ahead and take a quick look. Take a quick listen. All right. Let's just do something really obvious. Okay, so let's say on this, so let's say I have this guitar going on, and in this guitar is the inserts. All right, just turn off the automation. So let's say I'll just take this. So that's the inserts. I hit the listen. So let's go ahead and bypass it, and I put it in listen mode. So it seems like the inserts are still taken into account. I'm going into the listen bus. So doesn't seem to, maybe it's how, going to like an effects send, and the effects send is quieter when it's being ducked down. So if you have like a vocal going to a reverb, that you may hear the inserts, but the return channel, the effects channel, may be dimmed as well. And maybe that's kind of causing could be causing what you're hearing. So let me know if I'm doing something differently than you, Michael Pierce. All right. Okay, so we see Kyle Kennedy checking in on lunch break from foggy Los Angeles. Got a project due this weekend. Loving the new audio export option. Stay safe and click the like button. All right, so I just see Jazz Dude saying Greg's desktop is on a huge 43-inch on his setup, and the chat's on his 27-inch. Always used 2 monitors for at least 10 years now, so that's cool. Okay, so we have a question from Willie Hollingsworth. Hi, Greg. Question to do with naming regions based on track name after you've recorded a track. Is there an easy way to do this? So, all right, let's take a look. Just do a new project here. Okay, so let's say I was not so smart and I didn't name my audio track. And now my audio track is named Audio 1, and I come here and I see the name is carried over to Audio 01_1. So pretty typical, but I think what a lot of people do is if you want to, let's say I'll call this live stream, and I think if I hold down the Alt and then Enter, so hold down the Alt key and then Enter, and that will change the name directly there. And you could also just change the name just by going into the file. But if you want to change it on the project window, you could just come right over here and just say, Willie, hold down Alt or Option, or I'm sorry, Command or Control. Sorry, Command or Control, and then you could rename the parts from the name of the file right there. So let me know if that's what you want to do, Willie. Okay, from Kyle Kennedy. I'm getting into bigger VST projects, but having trouble with routing MIDI controllers to contact using my keyboard. Should I split into different MIDI channels? So, depending what you want to do, realize that sometimes, I've seen people set up the controllers where maybe it's outputting on one channel, the controls. So, if I don't have Contact installed on here, but I'm sure that you could, there's probably a learn function. Now, if you have your control set up, sometimes you could have the control set up for quick controls or track VST or track quick controls. And these will be kind of, once they're kind of allocated or kind of defined in these quick control sections, sometimes this will take priority so that it could be available on any track and may not be accessible to like an instrument like Retrolog, Hallian, or something like Contact. So if you have them set up in VST quick controls or track quick controls or in generic remote, those may take priority over kind of just normal mapping. So that may kind of like, take a higher priority. So see if you have that set up like that. And, you could check out and get it kind of configured. But I think once you kind of get it configured, you should be in good shape. Just seeing a great comment from Millard Brownie. Guys, when I was a kid, we had to deal with one 13-inch red monochrome monitor and Voyager sequencer running on an 8286 clone. And he's saying two 23-inch monitors is pretty luxurious by those standards. So. All right, so another question from Kyle. Sorry, my timeline just jumped on me. All right, sorry, finding my... Okay, so from Kyle, sorry about that. Trouble with understanding the audio monitor settings. I'm having to click button on the track sometimes and it stays when I click another track. Easiest way to click on track and play. So it sounds like this is, I'm not sure if it's the audio monitor settings or maybe instrument. But let's go ahead and add just a couple instruments. And let's go ahead and add a couple of audio tracks. All right, so now when I click on instruments, and these could be set in preferences. So let's go to project and mix console. So you could say enable record on selected audio track or enable record on selected MIDI track. So now if I have that turned on, I go to the MIDI track, it's automatically passing. The record enabled is already there. Now you could also manually set record enable or monitor. And as we go to different areas. If it's been manually set, that will kind of stick. So just, but if you want it to, whatever you select, just go for that preference. And a lot of times, I know some people that like that for MIDI parts, but not for audio. It used to be only, they weren't separated. So some people would just accidentally click on a monitor, click on a track to do a quick edit while recording something else, and then they overdub on that particular track. So that's why they kind of decoupled the MIDI tracks and audio tracks for that regard. So, but just make sure you have that preference set, and I think that'll take care of it for you. Okay, so question from Jan. The statistics menu, audio statistics, show a lot of information for a WAV file. Can you briefly explain, for example, pitch info and how to use it? All right, so let's say I have... I think I have like a single... All right, so let's say I have this as... my audio file in my project. And I want to know, I'm doing samples. So let's say I just play this particular sample. So I'm going to take that, select that. Let's go to our audio to statistics. And as we look at this, okay, so we will say, so here we can see if we need to do DC offsets, what our different information is here. So let's see. So often I'm not seeing the pitch, estimated pitch. So it's saying F#2. So and if I wanted to now drag this to like my sampler track. So let's say I add a sampler track. So I could now drag this audio file, and I know what kind of the actual root pitch is. So I could set my root pitch accordingly. So say F#2, and now you could just kind of play. And, because I see a lot of people that take a single sample and they drop it in and it defaults to maybe C3. And then as they're playing the keys. But the pitch that they dragged it to for its root pitch doesn't match the actual pitch of the sample. So you could use the audio statistics, or you could, a lot of people use Vary Audio also to just kind of listen to the pitch. So you know what kind of the pitch of the single sample. So you could build samples that you could play from your MIDI keyboard that match the pitch from the MIDI signal coming from the MIDI keyboard to the sample that will play, so that you're not playing something in a key of C and it's actually playing in F# major instead of C major. So. I see sub 403. Wow, Greg's flying through the questions today, almost caught up. I could dream. So I think I got through questions once or twice. So. Okay. So question, does Cubase have a mono stereo enhancer? Let's say I have a bass with stereo phasing, but I want to mono the low frequency. So what you could do in that situation, the Imager plugin was just updated to kind of do this particular tasks. So if you come over here and just search for Imager, So this way you could divide the frequencies into 4 different bands. So a lot of times when people, and I'll just show it in a project here so you could actually hear it a bit. Okay, yeah, I'll show it in this one. And this is kind of a, it's a simple concept because a lot of people use like a stereo enhancer and it sounds very pleasing, but the low end could get very washy. So let's say if I wanted to come here and I'll just open up my Imager plugin. So I could take, so if I wanted to make everything wider, but now like the low end is a bit uncontrolled. So what we could do is take the low frequency range here and kind of mono that up, make it more kind of center focused. And we could take kind of the mids and we can kind of see like the phase indicated here as well. So if I wanted to bypass, so for kind of a phasey thing, what you could do is, and you could divide the number of bands and you could move just the bands as well. But this way you can say, so if you wanted that to be a little tighter, or even just kind of do weird stuff like that, if you wanted to pan, to create some really interesting sound design effects. So this is what out of phase audio sounds like, you could do stuff like that. And you could automate that on particular effects, but that way you could just take the low end and make the low end kind of more focused in the center. So, and which is, more important than ever with so much mono compatibility stuff going on for cell phone listening and people listening on tablets. So I see just a comment from Neurotic Nexus on the Cubase product page. Steinberg, I like the screen setup quite a lot. So I think that's like one of his wraparound vision LG monitors. I hate being in that room and just running Cubase on that computer when I've been at the office, because it is so very satisfying to have this ultra wide screen monitor. It's pretty cool. So. Okay, so for Michael Teams, Greg, set up a track using a channel strip type setup. All right, so let's say I'll just take this project since we're here. So let's say I wanted to all right, so let's open up the channel strip here. So if I wanted to come over here, so say if I wanted to have a noise gate, so at this point, if you wanted to cut out kind of all of the, and just kind of like where the signal had kind of faded away. You could also have your typical compression. So if you wanted to, let's say, play around with the attack. And we'll have our channel EQ. And we'll have tools, and like for drums, we could do de-essing, but also the envelope shaper. So if I want more tack, maybe I want more release and length. So you can really, completely almost change the vibe, the texture. You'll have saturation, so can't go wrong with magneto for kind of typical tape saturation. And then different limiters, so if you want to run on so that will kind of give you an idea. So, and then you could just kind of swap the order of these processors as well. So instead of like having 6 different plugins where you have to open and close plugins, hide it behind another plugin, really play around with the built-in channel strip. Gives you wonderful signal processing without any of the hassles of dealing with, multiple plugins. So just great kind of workflow. Just seeing a great comment from Michael Teams on display monitors. I'm older, it needs to be bigger. So that's always helpful. Yeah. Okay. Reading through comments. All right, so just saying from Bob, on a related issue, I just tried a trial of 11 Pro, but went with Artist. I used canned tracks, but was pleasantly surprised to see the Very Audio is included. So yeah, it is. That was one of the things with Cubase 11 is that the Very Audio made it down into the Cubase Artist, range. So. And Bob's also wishing that the track alignment was in the Artist. So now you could always jump up when you need to, but the audio alignment just came in like 2 versions ago, whereas Very Audio has been in since Cubase 5. So maybe as the program matures more, it might make its way down. Who knows? So. Okay, so just see my preferences didn't migrate correctly from 10.5 to Pro, and I used the profile manager. Yeah, I mean, I haven't run into people that have had problems with that, but, you could always try saving, some people have better luck if in 10.5, if you save the preference as a preset and then maybe try to save it in 10.5 and then try to do it in the profile, see if that helps. Seeing Pablo is talking about the listen function, that he loves it. That's great. Okay, if there's time left in this question from Jan, creating a bass line from chord track, do I have to learn to use a logical editor to create a bass line from the chord track? So I don't think it's too bad to work with. So let's show you how to do it quickly. So do new project here. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. I hope everyone's learned a tip or trick. And if you have, make sure you hit the like button. All right, so I'll just play a couple of chords here. All right, so say if I want to extract the bass line from this. All right, so there's a couple of different approaches. Let's set up a logical editor function here. Okay, so let's just say we want to say extract, and we want to say types are equal to note, and we'll just say we're value 1, which is the pitch, is, let's just say, note is equal to, or there's a couple different ways. I think there's let's okay, so I'll do the simplest way here, just not to. So we're say type. So let's say our lowest note is going to be like F2. So we could come over here and say, let's extract notes. We're value 1. All right. Let's try this. Okay. So I'll just say, okay, so we'll say type is equal to note context variable. Okay, that's what I was looking for. Is equal to, and then we could say position in, so lowest note in chord. So now that we've done that, that will automatically just extract the lowest note within that chord and put it into that track. So try doing, once again, extract, type is equal to note, context variable, and then we could say equal to lowest note in a chord position. And we'll just choose that to select. And I think that will do it for you. So play around with that, Jan. And you could also just specify particular chords as well, or particular pitches, like say, C1 to, F sharp 1, something like that. Okay, question. I'm wondering how to have my sound going to my stereo out and to a monitoring out at the same time. It used to do this, but I can't get it back now. I have to choose one or the other. So it could be a preference that gets toggled. So if you're doing this in the control room, So try going to preferences to control room, and then there's exclusive device ports for monitor channels. Make sure that that is unchecked. Otherwise, you could only use like one output connection going to your monitoring system. Whereas if this is checked, you could actually, that will restrict, so that you can't use have two different monitors setups that are using the same IO configurations. So see if that allows you to do it. So try just unchecking that. So again, preferences under VST to control room. Try unchecking exclusive device ports for monitor channels. Okay, can you give a quick newbie tutorial on how to use the stock limiter? Okay, so let's go ahead and I think this might be a good one to work with. Okay, so I'm just going to put it in a master bus in this case. So I'll just run it as a plug-in so we can see it a little easier. So here you could, just kind of whack the gain up. So if you want more gain, and we can see the gain reduction here. So without. There you can hear it already starting to pump. So, depending on the source material, you could always kind of whack the input gain up and, just kind of tweak around. There's only a few parameters to really kind of work with. But, but sometimes you can smear transients pretty easily. So, kind of use it with discretion and, make sure that you're not using it the wrong way to kind of make up for other deficiencies like in a mix. So, but hopefully that helps. All right, we see that Agent K has to get going. Thanks for all your help with the moderation. Always appreciate it. All right, and Millard Brown has a dinner date with his wife, or his honey. Okay. All right. Sorry, my chat field jumped on me again. All right, so I think we're okay. See, Kyle Kennedy saying going to have to learn quick controls now. So they're very powerful once you get into it. So. Okay, we have a question. How to make a MIDI track multi-channel if I want to control several different channels of Halion into multi-track. So if you wanted the MIDI track to output to multiple channels, what you could do is so let's say if I have, I'll add an instance of Hallian here. There's two approaches that you could really take. All right, is one, if you have this going on in Hallian, so let's say, okay, I have like a layer, and let's say now I want to do all right, so now like on MIDI channel 2, I have strings. And let's put maybe something really different. On channel 3. That may be a little too different. Okay, so if you wanted to do this inside of Hallian, one of the great things is you could come here and just make these all the same MIDI channel. So I could say, let's make this A1 and A1. So now when I play one note, all from MIDI channel 1. And if you say, okay, I only want these to come in at, particular velocity ranges, I can say only when I hit velocity higher than this does this patch kick in, and I want it, the strings to be transposed down an octave. So now when I play, if I hit it really hard, or the strings are now up an octave, let's make it down an octave. So within Hallian, you could do that. Now you could also put the MIDI channels in Cubase to any. So let's say these are all on different MIDI channels. Let's see if this does a trick. So, but, within Hallian, I would just kind of stack here because you have 64 different voices. But you can put this on MIDI channel any if, like, you have a MIDI file where all the incoming notes aren't channelized, depending on your controller. So if you wanted to have 3 controllers and each controller playing the particular MIDI voice together, you could put it onto MIDI channel any there. But if you're using Hallian, it's super easy to stack and be able to adjust like the keyboard range, the velocity range, or different controllers for each of the voices that are in your stacked. Okay. All right. So we see from Bob, I have 2 vocal tracks linked. I used to automate by clicking R and W and ride the slider to write the volume. Now that doesn't seem to work, especially on 2 linked tracks. So let's go ahead and add a couple of audio tracks here. Okay. So let's say if I have these tracks linked, and you could do probably just a quick link, and now let's go ahead and automate So I'm going to select these tracks and do a quick link. And we can see that automation is being written for all of those tracks. So if I just wanted to but it seems like that's kind of working. If you're doing it from a link group, you know, you could also make sure that, you know, if you're using the links here, that volume is turned on, but try just, you know, the quick link. And now, you know, these can all be written independently. If you enable quick link, now they could all be written together. So give that a shot, Bob, and let us know how it works. Okay. All right, reading through comments. All right, we see from Scott Sincati, very informative once again. Thank you. That's great. Okay, so we have a question. Any way to avoid loading stereo plugin versions into mono tracks? A preference, maybe? I know it's all in the same list, mostly with like parenthesis around M. Thanks. So, you know, depending upon your plugin format, like VST3 plugins, which have been around since, you know, 2006, those will automatically adapt to whatever whatever channel width is in the audio track itself. So that way a mono track gets a mono plugin, a stereo track gets a stereo plugin, a 5.1 track gets a 5.1 plugin. So I think, you know, it really depends. So if it's a VST3 plugin, it's kind of automatically done and you don't need to do that. But we realize that some VST2 plugins, you might have mono and stereo versions. So, and that's kind of the nature of VST2 plugins. So. All right, we see Neurotic Nexus having to check out. All right. So you see a question from Bob. I don't know why you do this, Greg, but it's greatly amazing that you do so. If you run out of questions, do you just sit and whistle? This lasts for 4 hours, doesn't it? We'll just, if we run out of questions, we run out of questions. I don't think it's happened yet. So it seems like we still have a couple questions that were emailed in. We'll get to in just a couple minutes, but not too many today. So, but we're hopefully it helps people, you know, get around their Cubase and their investment in the Steinberg software a little better. So. So a question from Sub403, is the imager new to Cubase 11? The multiband imager is new to Cubase 11. You know, the previous versions of Cubase have had the imager plugin, but now we have the multiband imager. So we see Gareth also mentioning to Bob that he never runs out of questions. So. All right, we see Bob's also mentioning, he says, I'm new, but I've already come to hate the 200 character limit. Haha. So you could always, email questions as well. So, but we understand. Okay, reading through comments. So are Cubase stock plugins professional? Yes, they are. And I think, even it was kind of interesting where we did like our Cubase 11 previews for a lot of people where we would give like a presentation to some of our high profile users, and we kind of use that for testimonial. A lot of times, pre-pandemic, we would do kind of a pre-launch event for like a major release of Cubase, whether it was going to, and then capture some video footage. And one of the recurring themes was that, most of the people were kind of migrating to using the Steinberg built-in plugins, because I've often called it versionitis, where, there's a major operating system update and your plugins don't get updated. So there's a lot of issues with that, but, we don't try to, we try to put the value into Cubase as opposed to selling plugins separately. So, and we've been doing the VST plugins, pretty much longer than almost every company. We've been doing plugins since 1995. So, we have a really good DSP development team. So instead of trying to sell it to you separately or, $29 you to death, we just kind of roll in a lot of the plugins and the advanced processing capabilities, and you see stuff like Squasher, the multi-band imager, all those types of functions that, that often you pay more for one single plugin than the cost of the upgrade or update from, one Cubase version to the next. And there could be 4 or 5 of those included in the actual program. So yeah, the many people I see are tending to just, utilize the Steinberg plugins more and more and use less third-party stuff. Okay, so from Mr. Ed. Hi, Greg. How can I link pan from left-right stereo combined to send, but automatically for every track? So let's go ahead and take a look at it. Let's do new project. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll give this a shot. All right, so I'm going to add a stereo. Let's just do maybe like a flanger or something like that. So I'm going to add an effects channel to this track, and okay, so now okay, so let's go ahead and open up the channel strip, and I'm going to take this particular track and just make sure. All right, so we have our combined panner here, and let's go ahead and all right, and let me see, I haven't done this in a while, if there's just a preference to link. So I'm just going to link the panners here. So let me just... So now if I wanted to take just the panner here. So what this will allow you to do is to pan the effect with the unit itself. But you could also do some other cool things where you say, okay, I don't want this linked, but I want it the, let's say the track panned here and the effect panned in the opposite way. So I'm not sure if it's, so I think now if you come over here and this preference, so if you want that automatically to be set, is under VST is to activate link panners for new tracks. So if you do that, then I think it's automatically enabled for other tracks that you add afterwards. Okay, so just see, hello Greg, I use an old HX1 for a controller. Is there any way I can feed the expression pedal to all 16 channels or at least a few? So if you have, I'm not familiar with what the HX1 is off the top of my head, but if you want it to, you know, let's say if I just have modulation going, and I'll just add a couple of instrument tracks. Okay, so I have these. So if I just select, so even though I have modulation here, you know, I could just have these tracks armed and I can move one mod wheel and that modulation wheel will be written into all of the tracks simultaneously. So if all the tracks are selected before you record, then that information is just going to be recorded, that same MIDI, like MIDI CC data, whether it's modulation or expression, will just be recorded simultaneously to all of the selected tracks that are in record. See, Michael Teams is upset that someone hit the dislike button. So, okay. All right. So we see Ace Guy 2001 just got his Cubase a few hours ago. Welcome to the Hangout. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat. All right, I know we had a couple of people sent questions. All right. So we have a question. Hi, Greg. How do I increase the range in controller lane of a pitch bend for a single MIDI tone in Key Editor? I use the whole lane, but it's only one semitone. So, you know, when we do pitch bend range, let's go ahead and load up like a quick retro log sound. And I won't play just all right, so let's say if I come here and I move my pitch bend, So what you can do is actually, on each of the instruments is where you could set kind of the pitch bend range. So let me just find something else real quick here. So, it's up to the actual instrument itself and not in Cubase of where to set the actual pitch bend range. So, instead of doing it in Cubase, every instrument will do it in a slightly different place. So it's really kind of up to the instrument how it's doing it. So we can see our pitch bend up, down here. Hang on just one second. My son's knocking. All right, my son is going to join the last couple minutes of the Hangout.
Yes, I will.
All right. All right, so if he talks, we may have to move on. So sorry about that. All right, so let's go ahead and we also had a question from Tan May about how to turn a series of 16th notes. Let me just see if I can get them out really quickly. Sorry. All right, my son's going to try to be quiet, but we had a question on how to turn a series of like 16th notes directly into whole notes. So let's say if we had a musical example, kind of like this. All right, let me see if I can get my son to leave real quick. Hang on, sorry. All right, so the question was if we had a series of 16th notes, how to turn these into notes that actually take the entire measure. So it's going to be to turn a series of 16th notes into whole notes. So how best to do that? So the best way to do this is to actually just kind of quantize. So we're going to set our quantized value to whole notes. And then I'm going to, let's say, select all the notes and hit the letter Q. So this will put them onto beat 1. And if we go to the edit, we could also come over here and choose to quantize the MIDI event lengths. And now that will turn that into whole notes for us. So if we do that, and if you find yourself doing this a lot, you could actually make a macro. So I think I made a macro to quantize the start and lengths. And to take a look at the macro, we can come here, and it's just basically those two functions. So it's going to be quantize and then quantize the MIDI note length. So I could take just this phrase here, run the macro, and depending upon my rhythmic value that I have selected there, I'll come right over here. It says quantize start and lengths, and now I can make it all into quartered whole notes directly there. Okay, so let's go back to, we didn't have many questions sent in advance this week, but let's go back to our main chat. Thank you for all the wonderful questions. Okay. Okay, just reading through comments. So I just see question, what happened to save as new project? So I just think it's save as does that. So, or the save new version will just automatically update that. So we're seeing lots of people liking their Cubase plugins. So I just see from Tony, is there any way to convert Yamaha XG.6 files to Cubase? So I'm not sure if what format that is, if that's a sysx dump. So if it's a sysx dump, you know, that you want it to read, so it's not going to, you know, take from a sysx dump and give you the Yamaha sounds, if that's what it is. But if you're not able to play back the sysx data, come over here to preferences and on MIDI to MIDI filter, and then make sure that you have the sysx data there. So the sysx, if that's what it is, will allow you to you know, store proprietary information for, you know, it could be like the different instrument sounds that are in the keyboard at the time. So, and then that could be sent back to the keyboard, but Cubase will filter it by default. So if you just turn that off, there's also an SY series of Yamaha workstations, like the SY85. So I'm not sure if it's maybe like a sequence file for an SY85, but they could probably also export it as a standard MIDI file. Okay, we're doing well on time. Okay, so question from Robbie. While I believe I know the answer, I save all my tracks on a separate drive because C is too small. Is that problematic? No, it's not. I kind of, on my personal studio, I have like, you know, one drive for my programs and what's installed. I have another drive for samples and one for audio. So it's not problematic. Just if you move it, that's when you get into problems if you kind of change the locations or files recorded to different drives. So all right, so we see Pablo loves frequency 2. You see for 11.5, Pablo wants frequency on the channel strip, so it might be hard to fit it in there, but you get to also have it on every channel just as an insert. All right, here my son's getting excited in the background here. All right, so we see sub 4.3s checking out. All right, we have a couple more minutes and we'll go. Okay, so say hi again. Don't know if you covered this, but what is the difference between pre and post fader in effects inserts? All right, so let's just jump back to All right, so when you have kind of pre and post faders, let me just jump back to a different project here quickly. Thanks again for all the wonderful questions. And we'll be doing this again on Friday. All right, so let's say if I want to have something that had a bit more drive in it. There's going to be kind of more, so I'll have this drum loop going on. And now I want to get to my inserts. So let's go ahead and run it through like maybe some magneto. All right, so now this is going to be kind of pre-fader. All right, so now as I come over here, let's adjust the fader. That's going to kind of affect the gain structure of that going in. But now if I go post fader and open up the fader, so it's going to be kind of differences, you know, when it's going to be pre-fader, you know, it just determines at what point how the fader affects the gain structure versus not affecting the gain structure going into the plugin. It's probably not the best plugin to show that with, but that's what the pre and post fader will allow you to do. And the cool thing with the inserts is you could have variable pre and post faders. So while it's going on, if you want to come here, let's set the fader down here. So I'll just do it with like maybe a reverb so you can hear it a little better. All right. So now I'll switch it to so the amount of the gain going to the reverb, you know, can be or cannot be affected. So the gain structure is not affected by the fader. All right. Well, I think we're going to be just about out of time. I want to thank everyone for the Hangout. Almost got to the end. But we'll do this again on Friday, and I'll go ahead and end the Hangout so we can still have our normal chat and closed captionings. And everyone, please stay safe and healthy. Goodbye.